Well, I'm clicking, got it. I have been just trying to turn on share here. I can minimize that. So I have one of these units. You can see my screen, right? With this TTGO thing.
Yes.
So I want to actually have two of these units, and the game plan is, to have one in a control box in order to be able to have joystick control and an e-stop effectively, and maybe some other buttons, but that would be the starting point. And so I've got to teach myself how to program this thing. This is an instructable that just starts with getting it to work with a temperature and humidity sensor. And so I've been trying to get this instructable to work. And so I have their code loaded up, and I just literally can't even get this code yet to run. And so at the moment, a particular issue is I know that's terribly small. I don't know if I have the keyboard skills to make that bigger. Get a mouse and get a control scroll going here.
Just Control Plus might make that bigger.
Control Plus?
Yes. It sometimes works in browsers. I don't know. I don't even know what you're running there, but
Yeah, that's the Arduino IDE. And yeah, I'm not sure.
you might have to go under File Preferences, and it might say something about font size at that point. Right there where it says 11, try making that bigger and see if that affects it.
Maybe a little bigger.
But it said right there, it requires a restart if you change that. So if it might have to restart your Arduino.
Dun, dun, dun. So anyway, I'm fighting with this code that was provided in the instructable. And here's what the, just stop sharing for a second. And just sort of, so I've got two things. I just put that humidity sensor on that board, and I also have a couple of potentiometers on the board as well when I get to the point of needing a potentiometer, but I was just trying to get that temperature sensor programmed in. And let's see if Arduino's back yet. If it's any bigger. Well, it's not any bigger.
On the menu you had up, it said font size for the editor and it said 11. You could have just changed that instead of changing any kind of fancy zoom stuff. And I think
Oh, that's what you wanted me to change, huh?
I think that will make it bigger.
Let's go with 18. How about that? Back to share. They lied to you, Jeff. Didn't need to do a restart.
Well, changing the fonts, you may not have to, but the other one said you had to. So that's big enough to be readable now.
So I was complaining about that. Now the include is capital SSD. And let me just go back to make sure. I don't think they have the code listed here now. I don't think I messed with that statement at all. Come on.
Is this actually an instructable for that board that you have, or just a board
Yeah.
in general?
No, it was specific for this TTGO. It's the same. TTGO LoRa 32 OLED board, which has there seems to be two different versions, one with something called a SimTech or a high-tech chip, and I'm pretty confident that I have well, there could be differences, but I can't say with 1,000% certainty that it's the exact same board. But I haven't gotten it seems to be a library problem.
What's it complaining about?
This statement.
So what's it say about it?
The specific complaint is does not name a type. SS 1306 does not name a type. So it's like that is not inside the
I'll go back, look at your include files again to see what you included.
Here's the specific.
And which, you've got an Adafruit one stuck in there. Which was the original stuff on that?
The one I have highlighted.
Okay, so that includes it. And you haven't made any other changes to this code?
That's why I was I was downloading it again just to double check. I don't know is the answer to your question. I don't believe so, but I was just going to go back and double check. It didn't seem to Didn't seem to want to open it up for some reason.
So otherwise, what you can do is go into the header file, figure out where it's at. It's probably under the includes on. You might have another problem where, depending on how the stuff got installed, it may be trying to look at a different directory or something. But if you look at the header file in there, it should say, is that what you're looking at right there? That's your
This is
INO.
the original code. It looks like that was capitalized. Maybe it's just a caps issue.
Well, then
Yeah.
I would try capitalizing it, and I see he's got 3 fields, and you had more than 3, didn't you?
I had names in these instead of numbers.
Okay, but it looks like it's the SSD 1306 it's complaining about. So I would try to capitalize that and see.
Yeah. I don't know why. I think originally I was having trouble getting this include to work, and I capitalized it, and then yeah, I think that's good advice. Yeah, so that's my issue du jour. See, that was referring to that, and that was referring.
So click on compile and see what it does.
I don't have a board connected to it. I unplugged the board.
Well, just click on the one that says verify or whatever they call it.
Never done that.
It's either the check. I think it's the check mark there, right to your left on the icons.
Is it the same as this verify compile?
Maybe.
Mine, I mean, even though I've got a decent machine, it seems to take forever to. Do its thing. Trying to make that bigger. It's not letting me make it bigger. There we go.
Did it complain right up front last time, or?
No, it takes a long time for it to compile.
It still says compiling, even though your little green slider bar has nothing in it. So
Yeah,
you just got to wait for it, I guess.
and I don't know what this magic is to make it go faster. I don't. Why it seems to take so long.
And one of those that scrolled by, it said something about alternative for SSD 1306. So you could, what did it complain about there?
Multiple libraries were found.
So that might be part of your problem, that when you try to install the stuff, it's looking in various places and.
Was not declared in this scope. SSD 1306 switch.
So it thinks you have, I think that's saying it's expecting capacitive touch buttons on your display. And I don't know if you have anything like that.
I mean, the board has the capability, but I'm not trying to use that. If display.
Wait, where did you see the thing that said multiple libraries or duplicate libraries or something?
Right here.
Multiple libraries were found for that. It used ESP-32 libraries. Is that the one you wanted to use, or do you? Well, right below it says there's a different one that's in another of your OneDrive stuff.
This is the one. That's the one it should have used. Libraries ESP-32 LoRa. I mean, if we go over and look at this for a second.
And just another minor point, it says that stuff's stored on OneDrive. Is this stuff not on your local computer that you're trying to compile?
And
if it's not on your local computer, that might be why it's so slow.
So if I go to this PC, documents, Arduino, libraries, these are the two files that are, these are the two libraries that it's referring to. And so that has there's an SSD 1306. And that one hasn't, so I found what it just found, that there's two.
So you may have to delete one of those or just rename it so it's not a .h anymore.
Yeah,
but my point was, when it's printing out those error messages, it says, here's the files, and in that path name, it said OneDrive. So I'm just wondering if, number one, this stuff isn't, your files are not local.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it would be necessarily going up to there.
It could be that it's using the wrong files in addition to that, but I'm thinking that's one reason why it might be so slow, because if it's trying to push everything out to a network drive somewhere, that may hose things up.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm like, it's replicating for backup purposes, it's replicating to the OneDrive, but it's if I go to my yeah. But it says C:\\.
It also says OneDrive in there. So it says users, your ID, and then OneDrive. So if you can get that, switch that to your physical computer, you might be better off. You know,
definitely.
I don't know if you can just delete the OneDrive out of that, if that'll fix it or not.
So back to this though. Has no member named begin. Display begin.
So I think what that's telling you is out in the class for the SSD 1306, which would be under one of those two libraries you're looking at, that they're saying it's not done correctly, apparently.
If I go to this,
Did it have that temperature sensor in the original code, or did you add that on?
This is the original code from the instructable that I've opened up with Sublime. So I'm not in the Arduino IDE at the moment. And I'm just looking for a second for this to see if I can. I
So
don't know if I.
Well, you got that right there. It says in function
I'll go back.
void setup. So that's I assume where it says in, see the first error there. It says out there on OneDrive that something transmit INO in function void setup. It says if not display dot begin. So it's expecting whatever library you have to have a begin function in it. So again, it might be a mismatch of libraries you're trying to talk to. And it says it's trying to use the test error. That class has no member. And then I guess the second one is also based on the same thing. It's saying it's trying to go out to SSD 1306 switch cap VCC, which may not be switch cap VCC. So that might be a mismatch of what you're trying to run there. So then down below it says you have multiple libraries, and it says the one it didn't use was
This
the
one.
ESP-32 OLED. Yeah, that one. So what you could do is you could go out and either remove that library, the top one, or just simply rename it. You know, you might be able to. You can take that and cut it out and just drop it in your desktop. You know, move it to your desktop so that library goes away, and then see if that makes it any happier. Otherwise, you're gonna have to dig through this and figure out, because it says it's going out to switch cap.
Check to see if this is in the original code, or if I may have combined code from a couple places. Yeah, that display begin is not.
I think that'd be the first place to start, is download a fresh copy and put that out somewhere and try to get that to run.
Yeah.
And then if that runs, then it'll get you by. Then you can figure out if it's just using the wrong library or something else is going on there. And try to get it to skip the OneDrive or whatever it's called. Try to get it to skip that completely. You know, try to get everything right on your computer and compile it from there.
Yeah, I had included that statement from the Hello World version, which used the Adafruit SSD 1306, and I guess I left that.
So yeah, that's probably your problem there. You either can't use this, you can't use the call from the Adafruit library, or you're gonna have to use the Adafruit library to make that work. So at this point, you might be able to just switch back to the Adafruit library in the include and run it again and see if that makes a difference.
But I think the Adafruit didn't have this. They had another way of like initializing the display. Anyway, yeah, that's been very helpful. Thank you for bearing with me as my sort of rudimentary programming skills are on display. Anyway, so that's what I'm fighting through. But soldered up, but, you know, like making some little progress. Well, got something physical to play with.
That's what's nice about the modern stuff. You only had to solder on 2 or 3 wires to get this stuff to work. You know, everything's included on the board, or then you just hook up sensors to it. So that works out great to do that.
So that's where I'm at. And this was going to be, oh, the other thing I just wanted to share with you quickly was last time we spoke briefly about how many pins I may or may not have. And let's see if I can get to the, make that a little bit bigger. Share again. Come on, screen share. While working through the hello world and working through, let's see if I can get that scrolled over. There's the scroll. Yeah, so just trying to work through. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
So these were, some of the pins, and was just trying to mark them off as I went through. And a number of these were used for the LoRa, so I can't use that. And so I think I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got 4 or 5 pins, maybe upwards of 8 pins to use. And they're on different sides of the board. So yeah, I think I've got a fair few pins to be able to try to use. So this is my sort of tool to try to keep track of what pins are available and what pins are not.
So those blue lines you've drawn through there, does that mean you can't use it? Is that why you drew this?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
because these are.
Yeah, some of them say they're already used for your radio.
Yeah.
And the thing for SPI, so apparently it's got a chip on the board. Do they tell you not to use it? Well, I guess if they show up on the pins, that would be somewhat of a problem. Now, keep in mind, if you got something else that's SPI, you can still hook it up. You just have to get a new chip select for that, for the new device, but you can still use the other SPI pins. Will still be in parallel. But if you don't have anything right now, it's SPI. That's kind of a moot point.
Yeah, so I'm just sort of taking it one step at a time at the moment. But that's just how I'm trying to keep track of it.
Where that originally came from, someone that they'll show you that picture you just had up there, and then there'll be a little table in the upper right hand corner or whatever, and it'll say these ones are used for the radio, these ones are used for the whatever. And it could be you can get enough from this where I see all the yellow ones do seem to be for the radio, and then the ones on the right that were for the OLED, I think those were a different color. They're also yellow, I guess. So anything that's yellow, I guess, is already used by the onboard, what they were trying to do. Now, I don't see where was the where it said onboard, what was it called? Flash or something? Is that what it said? I think you mark those off saying don't use them. Go back up to that table where you were crossing stuff off.
Those are the ones for the scroll over. Yeah, so like 6 through 11, it was saying don't use those.
Okay, is that something you did, or is that the original documentation said don't use those?
The original documentation.
Well, maybe it's chewed up a lot of pins. Maybe you don't have a lot of pins left over.
These down here that are okay are the ones that like 21, 22, 25, 32, 33, and these 34 through 39, I'm believing if I set to input, I'll be able to use as well. I was just gonna
And then you
test
have to
those.
look, see which one of those can be used as analog inputs too. It could be those ones say input only. You could use those as analog, but you'd have to check to see what you got there.
Yeah, those are these. And then an asterisk next to that. I could never find on the legend why they put an asterisk next to those.
Yeah, I hate it when they do that, but that's just what they do.
So anyway,
I'm noticing down there it says ADC1 under bar 4, and to the left of it says touch 8. Oh, you can use it as a touch input pad if you want to, is what they're telling you on that. I thought it had something to do with your display or something, but maybe it's just by selecting whatever you want there, you can still get it to work.
but I don't. Yeah, 32 still. That's on my list. It's okay. Anyway, that be where I'm at.
So probably most of the pins you want will all be inputs anyway. So just count up however many you got left over and say, is that enough to do what you're looking to do?
That's fun. It's a new board though, and I got to remind myself that it's a learning curve for a new board, which is a bit of a pain in the backside, but you know, there's a lot going on this board with LoRa and OLED and anyway.
So another thing that I may or may not have brought up, I know when I was on the Artisan Asylum Zoom meeting, and we're talking about these, and I said, oh, I use the LoRa board to do my remote control, and I was telling them what I was doing, and said, well, you know, it's slower than I expected. Yeah, I was expecting to be able to send 1,000 packets a second, but it's more like 10 packets a second that'll send. And the one guy who's somewhat of a ham radio guy says, well, you might be abusing your rights there. He says that band is normally used for IoT type stuff where, you know, like every 15 minutes you put out a little burst of data, and that may or may not be true. I've never heard anybody saying, don't use it for this, don't use it for, you know, remote control or anything. So that might be something that I think it's an unlicensed band, but still you shouldn't abuse it either. And then the other thing I thought of in my case, I don't need the full power, and I don't need 2 or 3 miles of connection range, because basically, like here in the back, here's my vehicle. I'm just gonna be walking around. You know, I'm gonna be following around with my remote control. I think you can go into the code and say set transmit power to whatever level you want. I probably cranked it up to the max just because I didn't know and didn't care. But at this point, since I only need like 20 feet of range anyway, I'm probably, when I get around to, I'll go in and set my transmit power down to whatever the minimum is, because, you know, my philosophy is I don't plan to drive it 3 blocks away. And number one, it's got to be within sight. Number two, I don't want it to get away from me, so I'm going to follow it pretty close anyway. Now, I know other people say, oh, but I got to have 3 miles of range on this, and I'm not quite sure why you need that, but so that's just more things to consider, that when it comes down to that, it could be that, you know, backing off the transmit power so you're not, you know, stomping on everybody in the neighborhood would be a good thing. And I could probably slow my remote control down. You know, I don't know how many times a second I would have to send my joystick to make my vehicle drivable. You know, it could be I can do that twice a second, or, you know, once a second seems like it's getting pretty slow. But, you know, I could pick different transmit rates too, just to see how it acts and what it does. And as long as it's got a timeout at the other end, so, you know, if you were to set it for sake of argument to 1 second, then, you know, you move the joystick up, there's going to be a delay before it starts moving, and you change the speed, there'll be a delay, or there could be a delay depending where in that 1 second time window your thing falls. But if I play with that, I could get probably something fairly usable just by playing around with that. What was the other thing I was going to say? Speed, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and then the fact that if it's set up where if your vehicle is not receiving your signals from your control unit, it's supposed to shut itself down. So you can have a timeout on that says, if I don't receive anything for, if you got faster packets, I would set that to like 1 second. If I haven't received something for 1 second, I'll shut down. But if you're going to, just do an experimentation, I can say set my transmit rate to one packet per second just to test it out, and then set the delay to like 2 seconds. So you got to decide how far can your vehicle go in 2 seconds before it actually shuts down. So yeah, you have to take things like that into account.
I just Googled LoRa power setting and was just searching around to see if I could find where you set the power. Have you done that at all?
I think I've seen it, and as I say, I may have set it to max power when I first started playing with it, and if I left it, then that's what it is, and if not, it was probably when I was playing with it at work. I set it up to max power and then trying to just see how far inside the building I could go. Now it could be when I created the code for my actual robot, I may have just started with fresh code, in which case I probably didn't crank it up any higher than it needed to be. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting article, but I don't actually see any power setting mentioned in it. But I'll put that in there just for reference.
If you go to the Adafruit stuff, I think they've had pretty good documentation on the stuff. And I think everybody's using the same libraries to do this. So no matter where you find it, it's at least going to be close. I know you pointed out that you seem to run into a problem with the include files and the statements between Adafruit and somebody else. And I have noticed that Adafruit likes to do things a different way in certain cases. I think it just depends who writes it. So there's certain things that I found, yeah, I don't like the way they did it, or I can't figure it out. And so I think I ended up using, actually on mine, I think the board that's in my remote control, it has like a Cortex M0 ARM processor, and it's got a LoRa module. And that one, I'm using the Adafruit libraries on that one. And then at the other end, I've got a Teensy 3.2. Simply because I had to have a CAN bus, so I got a Teensy 3.2. I'm using a different instance of that library at that end. So I've got two different libraries that are talking back and forth, and it's just a matter of you can't mix and match the files like you just found out that's you got to be careful about that and so forth. And I think I think the documentation in Adafruit will talk about that transmit power, and there's just a define somewhere it says, define the radio power to this. And there's another one that says something about they don't really seem to have channels as far as I can tell. The spread spectrum stuff, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but somewhere it says here's a number you can put in there. So if you've got multiple devices, or if somebody else in your neighborhood has one, yeah, I think it's like a number between like 1 to 33 you can put in there. They say just randomly pick a different number and put in there. And I think that's the equivalent of changing a channel. So that's something else that you may want to look at someday. And I think that was in the Adafruit stuff. They were talking about that.
They have a band, but I didn't know if it was one band for North America and one band for if it was linked to what optionality you had on the band, if that was
well, part of the difference when you start talking about the bands, you can buy one board that runs 433 megahertz, which I believe is a European standard, and you can buy the other one that's the American standard that runs that your board that you have is switchable between 915 megahertz or 896 megahertz or something like that. There's two different frequencies. You can change that, so that may or may not. If you run into problems with somebody else, you may be able to just flip that to a different band, and that'll work. But there's other thing I'm talking about is something the way it actually talks to the radio itself, and it's as I say, it's like a concept of channels on the thing, but I don't think spread spectrum actually uses channels. But they just that's a point. They just say you can change that number, and if I might try that someday. I could just have a single remote control, and if I get my lawn tractor modified, then I could just, whichever vehicle's turned on is whichever one's going to listen to the transmitter. Or I could even put a switch on my transmitter, and just depending which position the switch is in, it's going to use, one of these different channel numbers to work. And so that's something I would have to look at one of these days to go forth on that, I guess.
So you were doing 10 packets a second.
I found out that if I basically just had a loop that was running. So it says while one, it said go out and read the joysticks, read the switches, format it into a statement, and call the transmit routine, and then sit there and wait for a response to come back. And it probably had a timeout. And in fact, I'm sure that has a timeout. And either way, then it follows through and just goes back through the loop again. So at the bottom of the loop, I just initially had a thing that said delay for 500 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds or whatever. I noticed as I start lowering that number down, I got to a point where my delay wasn't doing anything. It was just the amount of time it took to transmit a packet out and get a response back. I just ran into a limit there. Right offhand, I don't know what that speed is. I suppose it would be fairly easy to put a print statement that print out the time or whatever to tell me that, but whatever I ended up with, it is usable for what I'm doing. It's actually quite usable, and I don't know what the exact numbers are.
So I don't remember in my hello world whether it would like send a packet and then wait. Was there a confirmation that it came back?
Again, depending on whose sample code you're running, they can write it, to do anything you want. If they just wanted to blast it out and not care about a response, that may be the way your code is written. But probably if you dig through the examples, you'll find one that says send something out and then wait for a response back, and that way you get it acknowledged from your vehicle.
But that's what you did, is you sent a packet and waited for a response.
That's the way I'm doing it. And if I don't get a response, it times out. So I've got the LED on my board, what they usually call the pin 13 LED. I've got that set up so when it transmits, it turns that on, and when it receives the thing, it turns it off. So when I first turn it on, in fact, I don't know if you can see this. Right there on the LED, you can see it blinking about once a second there. That's the fact that there's nobody listening to it. So it simply sends it out and waits. It's probably a 1 second delay. And if it doesn't get anything, then it continues on and does it again. Now, if I turn on the receiver, then that'll start blinking faster. And I don't know how fast it's blinking, but that's another indicator if you're connected to somebody or not. So that's just that's all I know about the transmit speed, is that I turn it on, and if it's not connected, that blinks slow. And if I am connected, that blinks faster. And right offhand, I can't tell you exactly how fast I'm transmitting. Because
but that's your indication of whether it's talking or not. There's a handshake.
Whether I'm connected to somebody and it's responding is what that's telling me.
Yeah.
Because it still sends out like once a second, it'll blast out my packet saying, here's all the information you need. And then it's if the other side receives it and says, oh, okay, I verified that, it'll just send something back. And you can just send something back that just says hello or I got it, or whatever you want to send, or you can actually put numbers in there and send stuff back. So like in your case, you got that little display on there. I think Bob was talking about this too, that you can actually get stuff from your vehicle and on the response packet, send back whatever numbers you want and put them on that display there. So when it's connected, you can get stuff going back and forth to see what's going on. Or if you had a lot of extra LEDs or a lot of extra IO pins, which it looks like maybe you're not going to after we just looked at that chart. Another thing is you can put extra LEDs on the board and turn those on or off depending on your status of your vehicle. And you may want to look at and put one of those LED strips on there. So it just takes a single bit off your processor, and then you can make it light up as many as you want. You just cut your strip off to however many you want on that. And that would be another thing, another indication of what's going on in addition to your text on your display. So you got lots of options, lots of stuff you can play with.
I would be happy with just getting an XY coordinate to pass back and forth for the moment. Anyway, after your meeting, what else is going on?
After which meeting?
You were talking about your meeting where the guy said, "Hey, you might be exceeding your radio limits."
Oh, this was a meeting about 3 months ago, back when we were talking about the guy in Boston that was transmitting halfway across the world on some ham band. It was during that discussions when we were talking about all this. And he just made the comment, "Oh, you might want to look into that. That may not be. You may have the ham guys showing up at your front door and wanting to take you out the back alley." So that's all it came of that. So it's something that made me aware of that, and I decided someday I should look at that, decide what to do about that. And another thing, I'll mention this again, and this won't make any sense until you actually go try this. But I came to the conclusion you should, if you're trying to do this concept where I say you have to have the transmitter on and the e-stop up and your battery's got to be running and all this before your vehicle will run. I came to the conclusion what you should do is make the robot the master. So its loop would say, well, if you're going to send extra information, you could say, here's my current location, and you send it out to the remote control. The remote control will say, oh, okay, let me send a response packet. So I'd read up your joystick, your switches, and send that back as a response. And that way, if you get a timeout, the timeout happens on the vehicle, not on your remote. Because right now, if I get a timeout, there's nothing I can do about it. I just say, oh, gee, I see the robot's running away, and my light's not talking to me right on the box here. But if you do it the other way around, where the robot is the one it's saying, send me information. And if it doesn't get a response back, it says, oh, I shouldn't move. I should just come to a stop and not do anything. And it's really no big deal other than you just have to decide which one, and when you write your code, one's going to be the master and one's going to be the slave. And it's just a matter of deciding which one that's going to be. And it's just a couple lines of code to switch it from one to the other. So it's not really, a big issue. And just getting it so your remote is the master and says, take this data and send it out. And even if you don't get a response back, you could drive it that way. But I like to have the response back. So number one, I know if something is not actually happening. But now if you're going to put it on make the robot the master, then it would always have to get a response back, because that would be the joystick information coming back. So it's just a matter of it's going to initiate the transmission and say, send me data. And then when the data comes in, that's your joystick and switches, and you do whatever you want with it. And if you don't receive that, if you get a timeout waiting for that, then you shut the vehicle down and you don't move until you get valid data coming in.
I think I understand that. I mean, the way I would think about that in my own head is I would use the language authority to proceed, and the robot would basically say, do I have authority to proceed, and wouldn't proceed unless it did. And one of the checks about authority to proceed would be, am I getting a valid signal from the remote control? I mean, there might be other things, but that would be one of them before it would say I've got authority to proceed.
Yeah, that's the same concept. As I say, I'm going to mention that. I'll probably mention that a lot more times. It took what, 3 or 4 years of me saying, no, you got to make a remote control safe before people are starting to decide, yeah, I should make that remote control safe. So this is just one more added thing that can go on top of that.
Yeah, I like I said, I would like to follow your lead, and just getting these two things to talk back and forth at the moment is my baby step to do that. But I think it'll be nice to have these LoRa based controllers talking back and forth. Work through the library issues. I didn't realize I had two. I thought I deleted everything and I was just down to one. So it's been a useful conversation.
And it could be on that library. I noticed it didn't have any path defined on that. So there's got to be some way you can say that if you want to include that name.h, if you've got two files with the same name in it, well, you have to somehow it has to know which one to choose. And it looks like in your case, it went out and said, oh, I found that actual include something.h file twice. So it's looking in multiple places, and you might be able to say, you know, in front of that, put like a my project slash the 1306.h or whatever it's called. There may be some way to specify which of the libraries you want, or maybe just don't maintain, just don't keep the extra library around. That'd be another option on that. So you can make a directory called saved libraries under your Arduino and just move that one you don't want into the saved libraries, and then it may not, then it's not looking in two different directories trying to find that stuff.
Yeah, I think I'll follow your suggestion about just move it to the desktop, or like you said, just a saved libraries folder and get it out of the way.
Just to experiment, that'd be a quick thing you could do. And that way, if you don't delete it completely, you don't have to go track it down again and try to reload it. So that might be a way to go.
Yeah, that one I had, trying to go back to the example, because I think, trying to remember where I found that one from, because the instructable was a little bit vague.
And that might be a problem there. If he was vague on something, maybe it's not as obvious as it should be. So
Yeah, I don't, as I'm scanning back through, trying to share again.
do you have a link for that Instructables website that you could post?
Yeah, bear with me a second. Ah. Where in the world is the chat? Why did my Zoom thing? Oh, like somehow that got minimized. I was just looking back through this, and yeah, there was no real. We said where to get the DHT. And then on the inside the code, he talked about whether you used DHT pin, but there was no real. So I've forgotten exactly how I ended up with the one that I used. Maybe I went to his. See if I made any notes about that. find that.
And just scanning through here, it looks like he's saying download his sender sketch and his receiver sketch. And he really doesn't mention any libraries at all. So I don't know if he's using the library that, you know, the people he bought the board from might have said, here, use this library. That might be what he's using. I don't know where he got that. And you might even go back out to Google and type in your board again, you know, the same stuff he's telling you here, and type it in, see if you can find somebody else walking you through this. Maybe it'll have a little better description. It looks like, you know, he's left out information here that you need to know to be able to program it.
Yeah, I mean, he. How did I find? Yeah, it may have been this one that. May have been this one that was where I got to the got to the library.
I've noticed this guy's tutorials are pretty good. And then also, as far as
Random Nerds.
Yeah, and what he's using for software or libraries, he's going to use whatever seems obvious, and he's going to use that. He's going to tell you where to download it. And so I would say, if possible, start with this guy's tutorial and download the code and see if it compiles and loads, and then go from there.
I mean, this was the Hello World one that I started with, and then I wanted a sensor. You know, I wanted to get something talking back and forth from a sensor standpoint. So that's when I moved past.
So by using this Hello World program, were you able to get the boards to talk to each other?
Yeah.
Right there, whatever page you're just on. He said he's using the Adafruit 1306 library, or whatever it's called. Right there, it says.
Yeah.
So if you were to take this tutorial and just drop the sensor into it, and probably he's got a thing that says add that sensor to this board. If you dig through his, see right down on the left there, it says sensors, ESP-32, DHT11, DH22. And I don't know which board he's going to run it on, but that should basically be separate from the display. So in this case, he doesn't have a display on his board, but he's probably also going to use Adafruit libraries on this one. So you might have a better chance of getting everything to work.
Yeah. Isn't it fun fighting with it's a good suggestion. Maybe go back to this guy.
Because you did have a problem there where you're mixing and matching. Someone was using Adafruit stuff and someone was not using Adafruit stuff. And that, at least for the radio, get everything from the same place and get your radio to work. And then you can add the sensor on, and hopefully just grabbing somebody's library. If this guy used Adafruit libraries for his radio, maybe get Adafruit libraries for that sensor and drop those in and see. And he may tell you on some of this stuff, you know, as he goes through his tutorials. how to do that.
Yeah. Better notes. I didn't take good notes, Jeff. I'm frustrated. I should have taken better notes. How did I get to?
You seem to have lots of notes there.
I do, but I missed a critical note. How the heck did I get to choosing that new library? I don't remember.
It's simply because the nerd tutorials uses the Adafruit stuff, and the what's that called? The online, the Instructables use somebody else's stuff. That's why you're trying to mix and match those two together, and that's where it fell apart on you.
Anyway. The development process.
So the only thing on my list, I was going to write down notes to talk about. The only thing I wrote down was laptop on lawn tractor. How far have you gotten to trying to put your laptop onto your lawn tractor?
Nowhere. I haven't moved to that physical step yet at
Something
all.
to keep in mind on the laptop and everything else you're going to use. This is a good time to design everything around what you have. So, like in my case, on my vehicle back here, I've got this plastic box. There's another plastic box on top, and then so between this board and the top plastic box, I have to close my laptop and slide it in there and drop it in some brackets I have, which means I cannot open the lid and look at it while it's driving around. So if you think about it ahead of time, try to figure out where can you mount the laptop on your lawn tractor. The number one, you can close it and drive it around, or you can lift up the lid and you got a screen and a keyboard and a pointing device right there handy. So just keep that in mind, that as you go to put this on there, you want to figure out how to, where can you put it and how usable is it going to be once it's on there. Because that in the long run, you can say, boy, I sure wish I could have opened that laptop and seen the screen on it. So that's one thing to consider there. And along with the other stuff you're putting on, you've learned what you did last time. And now you look at the new stuff and say, well, I want to move this, or I want to, make that more accessible or whatever. So that was just something I was thinking about, that, that like the fact, when I tried to add a laptop onto mine, I had nowhere to put it. Theoretically I could build a shelf up on top here to put it, but it was just easier to slide it into this slot right there. And then it's essentially like having a Raspberry Pi. I have no access to it at that point. Once I turn it on, I can turn it on and slip it in there. If I want to, I could use SSH to talk to it, but it would just be handy if I just flip the lid open and say, what's it doing? And then you can present, tons of information too, if you need to be able to see what the thing's doing.
Yep, that's a good idea, because I definitely think it would be nice to be able to pop the screen open and have all that real estate to see what's going on.
It's going to be hard to read out in the sunlight, but still,
yeah.
If you want to make a modification, drive it back into your garage and open the lid, and you can see what's going on there. You may also want to put some kind of a frame, so if the lid is open, you got some kind of a frame to protect it. So if you bang into a tree, or I don't know if you have trees in your yard, but you'll have trees with branches hanging down, and the thing tries to drive under them. That can wreak havoc with your vehicle. Or back when I used to mow the yard, I found that I try to drive under trees while I'm on the mower, and sometimes it would knock me off the mower. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very dusty environment, so a laptop for the office is not going to last very long. I mean, it won't be long to have to move to some sort of more protected situation. But again, I'm just trying to get something to prove that it works and get to the next stage of like making something happen, driving that AB line. There's so much fun and interesting stuff that could be done, but can't drive an AB line, can't do anything. Yep. But I think we're close. Otherwise I wouldn't keep working on it. Well, you've done it in simulation. Yeah. As long as you hang in there, I'm going to hang in there.
This is basically the same code that was running on that big tractor we did for the demo. So everybody knows this stuff works. It's just a matter of working through the steps and getting it to do what you want.
Sticking with it. Okay, you can turn off recording.
Okay.